Hello, everybody. On behalf of Mood Disorders Association of Manitoba, thank you for joining us tonight as we gather to listen to the second speaker in our Women's Speaker Series, Crushing the Stigma One Story at a Time. Our Executive Director, Rita Chahal, sends her regrets as she is out of town visiting with her family, but she sends her very best to all of you tonight. The Mood Disorders Association of Manitoba offices are located on original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. As a general disclaimer, the views, information, or opinions expressed during our Women's Speaker Series are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Mood Disorders Association of Manitoba or its employees. MDAM is not responsible and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in the speaker series available for listening on our Facebook platform. The primary purpose of this speaker series is to empower women by crushing the stigma of mental health one story at a time. This speaker series does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Our speaker series kicked off in September with our keynote speaker, Chantal Kreviazik, and features an extraordinary, ordinary woman sharing her story each month live on our Facebook platform. Tonight, we are very pleased to introduce our very own Marian Goldstone. Besides being our program director, Marian runs the Westman region on behalf of MDAM. She is our heartbeat in the West, along with her incredible team. Thank you, Marian, for all that you do. In addition to her strong academic background with 3 master's degrees, Marian is also an educator, a keynote speaker, and often invited to share her expertise about mood disorders and other mental health illnesses. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Marian Goldstone. Over to you, Marian.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you for the kind words and for the introduction. Thank you, Mood Disorders Women's Speaker Series, for inviting me to be here with you tonight. And thank you to all the sponsors who are putting on this event. The theme of the Women's Speaker Series, as Pam has said, is crushing the stigma one story at a time, which is absolutely huge because so often individuals will identify stigma as one of those very significant barriers in their attempt to seek support or even to speak about their mental illness at large. And they report consistently that they're fearing stigma from their workplace, from their friends and family, from society as a whole. And while we've done so much positive work in this arena over the years, there's still much that needs to be done. And one of the most important areas in which work needs to be done is also in the area of self-stigmatization, not just stigma in society, but the stigma we give to ourselves, because we rarely judge anyone as harshly as we judge ourselves. And so this speaker series is to be applauded because it gives women a chance to speak openly and to tell their truths. And by doing so, they not only empower themselves, but they also make it known to others that they're not alone and that support is available and that hope is real. So such is the power of collective voices confronting and overcoming both the internal and external stigma that we currently attach to mental health. And you know what? This stuff is as common as dirt, right? We know that 1 in 4 Manitobans will be affected by a mental health disorder, a mental health illness over the course of their life. And that's only the ones who choose to be honest about it. So right now, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and call it mental illness, not a mental health concern, not an issue of mental health. It's a mental health illness. It's a mental health disorder. And that's what we're taking the stigma off of. It's no different than diabetes or other chronic conditions. It's based in our biochemistry, some of our genetic inheritance. It's no different. And yet we treat it as if it's something that needs to hide in the shadows. We know that certain factors will predispose us to mental illness. Our family history, our age, whether or not we use alcohol and substances, to excess, our lifestyle choices, levels of stress, all those things. We're just like test tubes when you think about it. And it doesn't matter how these factors go in together. And it doesn't matter which go in that test tube. When that darn test tube is full, it spills over. And there we are, a mental health disorder is activated. And from there on, we're looking at the severity of the illness is expressed by the intensity of our symptoms and their perseverance over time. But the good news is there is hope. So if we look at our mental health on a continuum, we've got wellness here and we've got mental illness here. The good news is we're never stuck in one point for our whole lives. We move up and down that scale all the time. And there are things that we can do to help ourselves move that dial. There are things that our clinicians can help us with that will help us move that dial. So there's so much we can do and so many strategies that we can learn. What we're striving for is to try and keep ourselves in a certain degree of wellness and keep ourselves regulated there. Kind of like I'm a lousy bowler. So my bowling alley is there and I got my bumpers up on the side and the ball stays on that alley, not here and here over in 10 alleys on the other side. That's what we're striving for. And that's why we know that we can learn to do this. We can be instrumental in doing this for ourselves and to have others help us do it too. So mental wellness is real, mental illness is real, and hope is real. And that's exactly what brings me here tonight. I called my presentation Strength Broken by Strength and Still Strong. And I admit, I stole the words from a poem by Canadian poet A.J.M. Smith, and it's called The Lonely Land. And I chose this poem because of title, because very often when we're involved with a mental illness, we feel like we're wandering around in a lonely land. A friend of mine, actually Susan, who's going to be a speaker next time, has said sometimes you don't want to go into your head by yourself because it's not a safe neighborhood. Well, that's a lonely land in there too. And so the other thing about this idea of strength broken by strength that's talked about in this poem is there's two ways of looking at nature. And there's two ways of looking at mental health and mental illness. And one is if we're in, the mountains and the forests and the mountains, and we're right there and we're right up close in it, boots on the ground, we've got, bugs on our face and trees scratching us, and we go around the corner and rawr, there's the bear, right? It's dangerous, it's scary, we're vulnerable. That's what mental health can feel like, or mental illness, I should say. I'm not going to use that stigmatized word. I'm going to call it mental illness. And so there it is. It's right up in our face and we can't see anything but just around here. So that's how sometimes we feel in mental illness, is that there's, our possibilities are limited, right? But, if we drive down the road a few miles and we step and we stand and we look at the mountains from a few miles back, they look gorgeous. And they're, it's not that they're beautiful, but they look rugged and they look picturesque and they look strong and they endure over time. It's the same with our mental health. Once we're able to step back a bit and look at it, like our hand, if we move it out here, looks completely different. And we see the picture differently. And then we maybe see that we have some strengths and some things that we can do to start, engaging in this struggle. And then too, we become a formidable force as well. So that's kind of why I chose that title. So as human beings, we just have to remember that we consistently overestimate how awful and formidable a problem can be, and we underestimate our capacity to cope and get through it. So when I start my story, I'm not even going to start that in chapter 1, because if I were a book, I wouldn't show up till chapter 2, because so much in that story has to do with your story and my story. It has to do with the stuff that came before us too. And we need to pay attention to the fact that we all have pieces of our story where we can find some of our family history, some of our genetic information, but the piece we don't realize is that we can also find some of our strength, right? We can also find some of our strength. So remember that past trauma, can be passed on in the telomeres of our genes. Well, I think our strength can sometimes be passed on in our stories. And it's good to sometimes, when we've got no other place to turn, look back to that history and say, you know what? I'm living proof that they survived because I'm here. Right? I'm carrying on. So on one side of my family, I'm going to start to tell you a little bit about my story and my journey now. We have a history of alcoholism. Not everybody, but we've got a history and a presence. It's functional alcoholism in my family's case. We worked hard and we played hard, but it was still alcoholism. There was a history of suicide. And those are, some of the pieces of the family history. We'll just slow down on moving the slides for a minute. That was some of the stuff that was handed over to me. I'm trying to search for the right word, but handed along to me that, I have to watch. It's in my history, but also there's strength. There's musicality, there's green thumb gardeners, there's people who are good with animals. And as you could see from that table of them all sitting together, there was a real predisposition for people gathering in community. And many community leaders came from that side of my family. But on the other side, there was severe mood disorders, swings, highs, lows, violent tempers, lots of interrupted suicide attempts, people who walk alone. There was certainly some obsessive-compulsive tendencies, but tons of artists, tons of musicians, lots of academic skills, so really goal-driven people. So there were other things and skills that we can draw on. So remember back to that mental health continuum. We're never all well, we're never all ill, we're someplace in between, and we can always move the needle, okay? So there's always lessons of empowerment. If we have nowhere else to turn, we can turn to our stories because they're in there. They survived all sorts of things, depression, the war, the Spanish flu. They survived wildfires. They survived the loss of their children. This one particular picture of a family that's very close to me, my mom's family, she's in the back row. They lost their little boy. They lived in a shack in the bush, basically a long ways away from medical services. And when their child ingested poison, there was nothing anyone could do quickly enough. And so they always had his picture attached to the photo to show that he was there. So they survived so much. And they were, in my family, there were indentured servants, all sorts of different things that people had survived. So resilience and strength is real. And we're here in evidence of that sustainability. And we can look back and we can take strength from that sometimes when we can't feel that we have any other place to take strength from. So I'm going to go to the next picture, which is that of a favorite aunt of mine. And she has inspired the rallying cry for the females in our family. For me, my daughters, my cousins, and it is, we're high-heeled women in shotgun, we're toting shotguns, high-heeled women in shotguns, and don't mess with us. And this is a picture of her literally standing on her porch And we really don't know the truth about where it actually was taken. Well, when it was actually taken, but we know from the juxtaposition and the direction she's got that gun aimed that it's down the lane. So we don't know what the story is behind that, but we know you didn't want to mess with her. And move ahead to my generation. Well, we put down our shotguns, but we're still high-heeled women that don't like to be messed with. So, you know, the stories carry on and they inspire us. This was her grandmother, another spirited woman who found herself in a very difficult situation. She had been widowed, remarried, had a pile of kids. Her husband was a drinker, and she was in a very difficult situation. In those days, it was the custom of the day that she should suffer in silence. She did no such thing. She packed up and away she went. And as the story goes, the day her estranged husband, who had passed on, was to be buried, she was getting dressed up to go to the funeral, as was the community expectation that she would do that. And at the very last minute, as she was going out the door, she stopped and turned and said to her family, "Horse feathers. Didn't honor him alive. I'm not going to honor him dead." Put on her work clothes and went out and started raking. As the hearse went by, she stopped, she bowed her head and gave the respect that she would give to any person, and then went back to her job. Was there kerfluffle and chit chat in the community? You bet there was. But out of that came the family saying that what other people have to say about me is none of my business. So lots of things in our past. Everyone has these stories. These are mine. These are what inspire me sometimes, but everyone has them. So were all these women perfect women? Absolutely not. And neither am I. But we look back and we can gather from them when sometimes there's nowhere else to turn. And at one point in my life, I was there where there was nowhere else to turn. And looking back at these stories, well, that allowed me to take my rope and tie a knot in it and hang on for dear life, right? So when I entered this world, I was an only child. I remained an only child. I mean, you can see from my slides, we weren't wealthy people, right? Things were tough. I'd had a sister before that, but she had died at birth, and my parents were devastated. My mother in particular, it must have been horrific for her because there was nowhere for support. There was no place to get comfort. The prescription of the day was go home and work it off. And that's what she did after losing her child, was to have to leave the hospital, go home and start milking cows and feeding chickens and bottling milk and work it off because they had to do that to survive. So no wonder, with no support and carrying that amount of trauma, that she had developed an obsession over the years for wanting to take care of everyone else's children, which in and of itself was fine. But then she started wanting to tell people that their children liked her better than them. And sometimes she would even say that she raised their children more than they did. And people would stand back and they knew it was off. You could tell, but they didn't say anything. And there was nowhere for her to go for help. And I want to point that out because we're talking about stigma and how important it is that we continue this movement to erase the stigma. We're further ahead than that now, but just imagine, right? And so as it went on, and I came into this world, I was far from perfect. And in her mind, her first child had continued to grow and grew perfectly. And here was me, not living up to the mark. And so what came from that place was not something that was intended with any evil or hatred or anything. It was what came from a place of unresolved trauma. And repeatedly, I would be told, if you don't do what you're told, we are going to have to get another little girl. And so I very quickly grew up with the idea that I was completely replaceable. And really, if there was a standard for perfect, I was sure wanting. I didn't come close to hitting the mark. And remember, there was also a history of violent temper. And so there was lots of corporal punishment going on that I thought at the time was normal. But as I grew up, I realized it was not seen as normal by others. So by the time I entered school, I was obviously ADHD, but I already knew I was flawed. I wasn't good enough. And I had some serious body images already. This is my grade 3 class. I'm the one with the little circle on it right there. Second from the left-hand side. And you can tell I had the Buster Brown haircut because I got my hair cut with the mixing bowl, right? And I was solid. I was an outdoor little toughie. As I grew older, I streamlined a lot. But in those days, I was chubby and solid. And a couple of years later, there's a picture of me where I'm like that in the picture, because already I was ashamed of who I was, and I was ashamed of my body, and I was trying to suck in my cheeks and match somebody's expectation that I be different than who I was. Marian was not enough. And a piece of me had already started to numb by the time I was 8. We need to talk about this stuff, because if we can catch it when it's an 8-year-old and tell them, no, you're okay, then it saves people such as me from spending 10, 15 years of their life pretty much dysfunctional because of being disabled by mental illness. So at that point, I had already figured out that I needed to watch out for myself. The Calvary wasn't coming for me, and I wasn't enough. And it also started thinking, I have to please people. I have to please absolutely everybody. And I'll never be good enough. So this is when, looking back, I would tie another knot, because this is when things started to really unravel. And awareness is a large part of our battle in defeating mental illness. I was still a kid. I laughed, I had friends, I played, I did things like that. But remember that needle that we can move back and forth? Well, my needle was starting already at age 8 to shift to a direction towards mental illness. It wasn't regulating and staying in the bowling alley. So looking back, I know my parents loved me. I know they loved me very much. But they did their best with what they had and what they knew and who they were at that point in time, just like we all do. And what I'm saying is, as we look back, we can take strength from our stories, and we can take strength from the inspiration of the things they overcome. But we also have to allow that they were 1 in 4. Just like we allow that we're 1 in 4. And we have to just look at this, that this is mental illness and it is real. And yes, we can function with mental illness, or we can be completely dysfunctional with mental illness. It's a big scale. But this is why we have the conversations, because these things can be helped if we can talk about them. If we can get them out of the closet where we can actually talk about them. So when I look back now, I've learned that compassion and forgiveness are always gifts that we're well advised to give to others and to also give ourselves. Okay? Because bitterness is a heavy bag to carry around for the rest of your life. We all do the best we can. And individual issues that happen in our lives are not the entire picture. So we'll go to the next slide, please. And I am so glad I did. That was another not for me, to learn to forgive when I could, certainly, and to learn compassion for myself and for others. And as a result, my mom and I ended up at the end of her life, she's 101 in this picture, we ended up having probably the best relationship we'd ever enjoyed in our whole life together. I was able to be her daughter, and she was able to be my mom, and we were able to have fun, as you can see. And so, you know, this is the journey of talking and thinking about your mental health and having some supports along the way. We often forget how much learning is passed from these previous generations. And we also have to think about what we're going to pass on to the next. And that's one of the biggest motivators to strive to live in mental wellness. I love this picture. There are 3 generations talking and interacting and sharing stories. I love the next one, because this is my grandson also, and he's graduating and heading out into the world. This young man is an advocate for mental health and mental wellness, and can say the word mental illness because he's watched his grandma up close and personal and been very compassionate. And I did the best I could. And that was what I could do at the time. And now I'm in a different place, and I'm doing the best I can with what I have now. But he's now an advocate for mental illness and mental health. So we'll go, that's another, we have to think about what's coming forward. We have a legacy to pass on too. I'm going to go back to a blank screen right now, because what I want to tell you, again, has to do with stigma, but in a very nasty way. When I was 10, a life-changing event took place. My parents were going shopping in a larger city, quite a ways from my home. And being a kid, I didn't want to go shopping. I wanted to stay home. So they were arranging a babysitter for me. They phoned my regular babysitter. My mom phoned and got her father. And unfortunately, the girl was not available and was away. And her dad said, no, this wouldn't work. I can still hear my mother saying, not to worry, Marian's big enough to stay on her own. We'll be back by supper time. This was early in the morning. He was the only other person that knew of these plans and that I would be alone. And my parents left for Brandon within a few minutes. As a kid, I was happy to be able to hang out in my pajamas, not clean my room. I was in my room having a great old time. The rest of the house was just the rest of the house, and I wasn't worried about it. No one locked their doors in those days. And like kids, eventually, I made my way to the kitchen, which was just close to our basement stairs. And I'm going to warn that the next part is triggering. So if this is something that might bother you, maybe shut the sound down just for a minute. At one point, I was sitting there and I heard a sound, and I thought, oh, that's strange. I'm the only one here. And I became very frightened. So I yelled, who's there? And no one answered, but I heard another step, and I heard it closer. I froze. And I know now, after talking with my doctor, that what I went through was the effects of trauma, because I remember nothing until I was running down the lane with my dog, hiding in my dad's truck, hunkering down on the floor, keeping out of sight, in my pajamas in the cold of winter. I remember my parents coming home, and I told my story. I ran out and told them, and my dad grabbed the tire arm and ran into the house, and the look on his face was pure resolve. It wasn't just anger, it was resolve. I've never seen that look on his face before. I never saw it again. And I was terrified. Now, hours had passed, there was no one there, and no marks. But my mom said to me as he was taking off into the house, she said, "Oh my goodness, girl, you and your imagination, you'll do anything to not clean your room." And from that point forward, I know she was just trying to push danger away. I know that. I mean, she lost a child. She didn't want anything bad to happen to her other child. But you can see how it becomes very hard to speak out. There were other incidents that took place later throughout my teens, and I never spoke about them. I didn't want my dad to end up going to jail. I was afraid. I had seen the look on his face, and I could not speak of them. And I knew my mom was not in a position and a state to be able to hear that. My obsessive-compulsive disorder definitely started from this event. From that day forward until I was well into my 20s, I couldn't stay alone in a house with a basement. And certainly not unless I had that on one side and the exit on the other. And from that, for years after, I always carried something in my hand, a key or something, wherever I went, as my defense. And I scanned rooms when I went in to look for objects that I could weaponize in case I needed to. So eventually, he did manage to get me when I was in my late teens. And by that time, I was tough enough that I was able to get away, fight him off a bit. But it changed me. It changed me forever. It changed the way I saw people. It changed the way I connected to others. It changed me. The man drank a lot, and I could smell it on his breath. I'm still somewhat triggered by the smell of liquor on a man's breath. And what happened was the effect of trauma. To this day, I can still see the details on my housecoat buttons, the details on the pattern, the details on my slippers. I can still remember minute details. And yet I have a block of time that I have no memory of. So this is trauma, and you put that in your test tube and it starts to fill up. Decades later, because I did not tell a living soul about this until I was well into my 50s. I couldn't. I actually, I could not. And I did not tell anybody about it until I was well into my 50s. And I was sitting with my psychiatrist and saying, I'm kind of stuck. And would it matter if I told you that this happened at one time? And he just literally went, "Yeah, think maybe?" Well, yes. And then the logjam started to open and I began to make some real progress in my recovery. And so I pulled another knot on my rope. Be brutally honest with the people that work with you or try to support you, your clinicians. They can't read your mind. They know what you tell them, and that's what they know. And they know what they see in your behavior. So be brutally honest and be active in your own recovery. Everything is yin and yang. So even though that period of time was really tough on one hand, on the other hand, I learned that I love school and I love learning, and that school was a safe place for me. I was good enough there, and it came fairly easily. So I was very happy to be at school. And so I did find a solace, and to a certain extent, work fills that thing for me too. The only thing is, with my OCD, that sometimes when I'm under distress and things are bothering me and I don't want to face them or I don't want to deal with them, I will numb myself by studying too hard or working too long, and I will bury myself in it as a defense mechanism. So things are always, kind of double-edged swords. We look at them that way. By the time I was just a few weeks into being 20, I got married for the first time. And this was a big change. So this on top of, all this trauma beforehand kind of had me hardwired for some difficulties. And when I was 28, I had my first child. The rest followed in rapid succession, 3 of them in 3.5 years, and a miscarriage in between 2 and 3. I realize now I had postpartum depression. Again, another thing that's very, very hard for women to talk about and for society to openly embrace those conversations. And certainly an area that we as women need to destigmatize and make it okay for women to talk openly and share their truths, whatever those truths are. I know that for sure after baby 3, I was exhausted. It was a colicky baby. I was still carrying on with all kinds of body image things and what multiple pregnancies in a short time had done to my body. I cried and cried. There were times that, yes, literally, I pulled the blanket over my head and I just hid from the world. But stigma. How could I talk about this? I lived in a small community. I was friends with the doctors. I had coffee with the wives. We socialized. It wasn't something I was going to bring up at an appointment. And rarely in those days did they ask you about how you were feeling. So it went on, and eventually it kind of got a little better. But did it affect me? Did it affect my mental health going forward? Absolutely. 3 beautiful children. Oh my goodness, what I would give to go back and be able to do that differently today. So eventually, with all these things going on and my test tube being full to the brim, and a number of reasons, my first marriage ended in divorce. This is not an uncommon experience for people struggling with mental health issues, mental illness. It affects not only the individual with the symptoms, but also the family. It affects the kids, it affects the partner, it affects relationships. We need to talk about this stuff. We need to clear the air. And thank you, Mood Disorders, for letting me do that tonight. So as I moved ahead, my partner moved, and I tried to carry on in the house with the kids. And my solution was pick up another job. I was already a teacher and a head teacher in a large school, but I picked up a job lecturing at the university, and I lectured at least 3 sessions out of 4 every year. I also started a second master's degree, and I was working very, very hard, kind of numbing, because I could control that. I couldn't control so much else in my life that was going on. And my kids, when the divorce happened, were 6, 9, and 11. And in one way or another, everyone in that household was in a crisis, a mental health crisis. Everyone's showing it differently and at their level and in their own way, but everyone doing the best they could with what they had and what they knew at the time. And I tried really hard to make sure that my kids had supports and assistance. We look back now and we say, oh my goodness, there were psychiatrists, there were psychologists, there were social workers, there was everybody in the house. And at one Christmas gathering, one of my daughters said, wow, we put the fun in dysfunctional, didn't we? And we can kind of, thank goodness now, actually call it what it is and try and put a little humor in it. Not that it's great humor, it's Black humor, but nonetheless. But the one thing that I didn't do was search out those supports for myself. Not at that time, I was too busy. Well, what do the airlines tell us? Get that mask on first. You're not going to be a help to anybody if you're passed out on the floor or if you're gasping for air yourself. And if I could go back, that'd be another knot I would tie. Learn, help yourself, self-compassion, self-care. Interestingly, it was my mom, who loved to raise everyone else's kids, who came to my rescue. And she and my father deserve crowns in heaven because they kept us together. Now, was there still the dark side of that? Yes. My mom still told me that the kids liked her way more than they liked me, and that she raised them. And all that did was further my sense of guilt, my failure, my isolation from my own children, and my sense of sadness. So that was really, really hard. But I mean, she was doing the best she could. And did she help? Absolutely. And more importantly, she helped my kids. And if that was what was needed to be done and they got help, then I can pay that price. Once they moved out of the house, I was really busy trying to fix everything for them because, of course, everyone had been in crisis. So as a family, we experienced, self-harm, we experienced alcohol and substance abuse, conflict with the law. Good news and a worry was that there was a grandbaby on the way and a very young mom, but turned out, things turned out very well. And my daughter, is a good mom. But things definitely, have two sides, right? And so very quickly, I was busy trying to fix everybody and not fixing myself. And I learned very quickly that I can't control other people. The only person I can really control is myself and my reactions. How I react to things that I can't control is where my power is. If I engage in the drama, well, I don't have near the power that I do if I take it in my stride and accept the things that I cannot change and go with that idea. So what happened to me? Well, after we got the kids out of the house, it gets a little black because, I was on a tremendous amount of medication and I started to like to take extra. And I got so that I couldn't do without it. And that was worrisome. And I always wanted more. And then happy hour for soothing became happy hours. And, we talked about this. Well, I literally could not see the forest because there was a big tree in front of my face. And that was probably at some of my, lower moments, definitely. I was numbing, I was teaching, and eventually I crashed. My body finally stopped me and I had a stroke. I had to leave school. My eye was drooping. My arm was numb. I couldn't grasp. I was all muddled up. I couldn't find the right word to talk. It took me forever to learn how to write a decent sentence after that, I'll tell you. And I was very, very confused. The hospital confirmed the diagnosis, and I spent the next year in the care of a cardiac neurologist. Strangely, I had no problem facing the world and saying, I had a stroke. I have to watch my blood pressure. Do you think I could face the world and say, I have a mental illness? I have 4 diagnoses now. No, I couldn't utter a word of that. And this was not number 6. If you're not going to take care of yourself, if you do not stop yourself will stop you. Because eventually my body caught up with me. I developed a very serious eating disorder. I could definitely swing 70 pounds in a year. I was obsessed with yard sales. I literally became a hoarder. My home was a mess. I needed to get straight with drugs and alcohol. I was no longer functional. I couldn't work. I couldn't even keep myself clean. I went weeks without a bath or a shower, changing my clothes. And there were times my thinking was actually delusional and unrealistic. And I made some suicide attempts, which were interrupted, thank goodness. And I had a ride in a police car with some pretty little bracelets too. So by this time, I had remarried. Kermit the Frog says it ain't easy being green. Well, it ain't easy being bipolar, depressed, anxious, ADHD, OCD, or any other mental illness. And it certainly ain't easy being the partner, close relative, or friend of someone who is experiencing mental illness either. And I'm going to ask you to call up a picture, please. There he is. For that support, I am eternally grateful. That was a very, 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 very dark period in my life. This is my second husband, and his name is Vince. And he supported me. He supported my kids. He supported my aging parents, and he supported my 3 dogs and 3 cats. For that, I am eternally grateful. And in this platform, I am going to acknowledge that tonight. And I'm also going to say, does that always look like, oh dear, pat, pat, pat? Sometimes people say things you don't want them to say. Sometimes they lose patience with you. Sometimes they too are basically pushed into a very stressed place because of your mental illness, or my mental illness it was. But through that terrible period, he stuck around, he showed up, and that's terrific. And I'm going to give him the space and the praise he deserves tonight for that. So thank you, Vince. I had allowed my mental health to slip really bad. And I was seeing psychiatrists and supports, but I was waiting for somebody to come with this wonderful magic wand and wave it over my head and give me a magic pill so that everything would go away and I would be magically fixed. And what I didn't realize was that the person who was responsible for initiating my recovery was me. I needed to be an active person on my team. I needed to be part of my recovery, not just the recipient of a recovery delivery from Amazon, right? So I started finally to shift a little bit. I started to build a support team around me. It was my clinicians. I started to look to my community, and I found some things to go to. I had, in addition to my second husband, who was very supportive of me, I had a few friends and some family members. And so that was pretty good to start with. And then I started developing some activities and things to take my time and enjoy. I started eating better and exercising, a few things like that. Things started to shift. I started to realize my thoughts weren't facts. I started to get some structure in my life. I started a program called Age is an Asset that's run by Samaritan House in Brandon, and that was a game changer for me. I learned as much as I could about my diagnoses because that was part of my empowerment. I learned about how I was wired. And I learned what I looked like when I was well. I learned what I looked like when I was starting to slip. I learned what I looked like when I was in crises and what I needed to do in each of those to either maintain it, bring it back, or bring it all the way home, right? The long trip across the field. So another knot in my rope was learning that I am instrumental in my own recovery. And I learned a few strategies to help me along the way. I learned that when I'm climbing a hill and I'm looking at the top, I don't need to look at the top because I'll never be happy. I'll always want more. But if I turn and look the other way and I say, I've managed this, I've managed this, I've managed this. I may not be the biggest oak tree on the hill, but hey, I'm not a bad size, willow or something like that. I'm okay. I am enough. I learned to say that. It's not perfect, but I am enough. And I learned to be compassionate and give myself a break. And I learned that when things are very raw, like that, nature raw and tooth and claw, that we stand back and then they take a different perspective. And then sometimes we can kind of more objectively sort out how we fit with that situation and what we can do about it. I have 4 diagnoses and I have 5 degrees. I got all the diagnoses pretty much before I got the degrees. So I think the degrees are winning. And for good or bad, what that says is that even if we have a diagnosis of mental health, that does not need to get in the way of us doing some things that we want to do. That does not need to get in the way of us moving into progressively more and more wellness. I will always be in recovery. That's just the way I'm wired, okay? I'm playing the hand life has dealt me as best I can. But I believe that there is the possibility to live in wellness, and I believe in hope, and I choose life. And when I am at a place where I'm struggling with making that choice, I know now, I know that part of my work is to reach out to others who can help me see that again. And it's that reaching out and knowing when I need to do that. So at the start of this talk, I started making knots in this rope. I got a whole bunch of rope here in this office. And I started with one that I hung on to in desperation. Well, over the course of my journey, I put a whole bunch of knots in my rope. And you know what? Now it's not just a rope with knots in it. This is now a ladder. And so if I do get down and I do slip, now I can climb it like a ladder, and I can remember all those things that I learned and that I have in my toolkit, because those are the things that will help me get back to living in wellness. And if we use those things, sometimes if we do slip, it's not the end of the world. It can happen, but can we activate some strategies and reach out to some supports and have some conversations? You bet we can. So I thank you so much tonight for hearing my story and for allowing me to talk about my journey. And hopefully there's someone else out there tonight that won't feel alone in theirs. Because as we tell our stories, this allows us to slowly, one story at a time, erode some of the stigma that surrounds issues of mental health, and allows us to talk about it and make it less for the next generation to come. And if we keep doing this, eventually it will be, like I said in the beginning, as common as dirt. And we won't have to go through this hiding in shrouds, because if we can catch things early on and call them what they are, biochemical disorder, a genetic predisposition, whatever, it's not our fault. There's no one's fault. It's just the way we are, any more than we would say someone was at fault for having diabetes. This is the way we are. And so I thank you. I thank you for hearing it, my story. I thank my friends, my family. I've already thanked Vince for his part in this. And I thank you, the listeners, for listening. And I know out there tonight, I've got some sisters in my journey. Some of them contacted me before this. I love you, gals. And thank you so much. I love you, all those folks who are part of me being here tonight, because without that support and the friendship of all those special friends and special people in my life, it might be a different story. And I am so glad I have been here to share with you tonight. And I hope you'll come back and take part in all the speaker series, because there is nothing more powerful than the collective voices of women talking. So thank you so much. And I know I'm going to turn it over now to my colleagues to manage the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marian. You definitely touched my heart, and I'm sure you greatly impacted all of our viewers tonight. I know I was drawing tears at certain points. So, just thank you from the bottom of my heart, Marian. You definitely helped crush the stigma with your story. At this time, we would like to open it up to questions. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dana. She's going to pose some questions to Marian from Facebook Live.
Great.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you all can hear me. So I'm just here starting off with the questions. There's one from Melissa. Her question is, where does someone start their journey on the road to healing? That's actually a really good question.
Wow. Yeah. I think there is a point, and it's different for everyone, where something hits you and you say, really? Could that be me? I'm wondering. Oh, that sounds a lot like me. And then gradually we gathered the evidence. I think, and I'll put on my academic hat here, I think it's something like between 9 and 11 years or something like that from the time we typically first start having a thought about this till we actually get to the point where we may have actually sought support and sought a clinical opinion. So it does take a while, but it's interesting because basically what we tell people, which is the standard advice, if you have a feeling of low mood that does not move, we're not talking about, I feel crappy right now, but my girlfriend just came to the front door and asked me to go for coffee, and hey, I'll go, right? We're talking about that low mood, no hope, no enjoyment of things that we normally love. We're tired, we're feeling fatigued, we're starting to isolate socially. We may be struggling with keeping ourselves clean. Our hygiene is often the first to go, our eating habits, our sleep patterns, all those things, they're starting to unravel. And that's happening for a period of 2 weeks, probably, with no interruption, no feeling of hope. And we're feeling that hope is slipping away. It's definitely worth talking to a professional. I mean, they may say, no, it's just, this, that, or the other thing, or, this or that, and your test came back and hey, we'll fix it. But it may well be that the conversation needs to be opened. And when do you know? You feel it. You start to wonder. And I think one of the ways that I described feeling depression was I knew when I became very aware that the face that I was putting to the outside world was not the face that I was wearing inside. And I knew that I was trying to look stronger than I really felt. And I would say, if you feel that, then please seek help. I hope that answers the question somewhat.
No, it does. I think even just giving solutions to people, because I feel like, well, I actually wanted to read out some of the comments because you can't see it, but I can. I just wanted to see how inspiring you are. A lot of people. So I've got comments from Vince saying, well done, sweet young thing. So cute.
Oh, that creep.
I got Karen saying, you are a strong, resilient, and beautiful person, Marian. Thank you. Melissa also commented as well, you're very inspiring. Juanita said, Marian, you're amazing. Susan said, love you, Marian. You are such an inspiration. You saved my life. So nice. Ekta, who's also one of our employees, she also said, thanks, Marian, such an inspiring story. I also have another one from Nicholas. You are an amazing person, woman, and mom. These stories help all of us all stay on the right path and realize there is hope. I love you with all my heart. With all my heart, Mom. Great job, and you do some amazing work. And actually, she answered some question. She has a question from Nicholas. How do you keep the family unit safe while in the first stages of recovery?
Oh, Nicholas, is that his question?
Yes.
Oh, you have to give me the tough one. You know what? And it was the hardest thing that I ever had to do in my whole life. And I think I teared up a bit when I was talking about things in the presentation. As you become ill, sometimes we have to ask for help. And sometimes asking for help, in the first, you said in the first stages of recovery. Well, sometimes we have to ask for help when things are going apart, and then we have to start getting it back. We have to respect people, I believe. And we sometimes very much get hung up on what normal should look like. And normal is just a setting on a washing machine. And what is normal for one family is not normal for another. So when we're trying to keep things together and foster that development in the first stages of recovery, I think we have to just respect each other and realize that sometimes we will go on our own journeys in different ways. But as long as we can do it with a certain amount of respect and keep the drama out of it, I think at that point, it has hope to come back to being regular and more intact at another point in time, because we don't want to do any more damage. And if we can keep it together by bringing in some other folks to help support us, then let it be. Because at the end of the day, I know that I am just so blessed to have raised or have in my life 3 wonderful kids who understand me each in a different way. And I understand them each in a different way. And I respect and love every one of you. So it's complicated. There's an answer for you. It's complicated.
No,
But I
love
think
it.
we're doing it. So
Yeah,
it's
no, for
complicated.
sure.
And you know what? I'm dressed up tonight and I got these pantyhose on, and you know what? One size doesn't fit all, right? That's just the way we can sum it all up. For every family, it's different, right? So yeah, I hope that kind of answers that question.
Yeah, your timer is going off.
I'm
Marian, by
sorry.
the way.
All right.
No, it's okay. No, you're focused in answering the question, which
Sorry.
I'm glad people are. I guess we have time for maybe one more question, I would say,
Okay.
before we wrap up. But Juanita asked, actually, how are your children today?
Oh, my children, I am so proud of them. I mentioned my grandson was an advocate for mental health and wellness in university, hoping to be a police officer. My other little grandson is busy with dinosaurs. My grandchildren on Vince's side are at various points in their education in Saskatchewan and all doing very well. My own kids, I have a daughter who is a master's degree in performance in cello, graduate from Juilliard, and then has also now gone on to become a resident in neurosurgery. So she's a lifelong learner, obviously, and my other daughter is working towards a doctorate and is a mother and is a yoga instructor and a passionate writer. All of my kids have a real solid understanding of mental health, mental illness, and none of them are afraid. And my son, I have to go back and talk about my son, of course. My son is a local Winnipeg business owner, has a landscape business, has a property management business. All my kids have absolutely splendid partners, and I love them like my own. And they're all doing so very well. I just sit back in awe of them now. And you know what? It bothers me sometimes to be the little old granny in the background that they help. But oh, wow, does it ever feel nice? Because sometimes they do the most wonderful things. So that's how my kids are doing today. They turned out so much better than I could have ever imagined. And that speaks to resilience, because it was tough. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I'm so honored to be able to just hear your story. I think everybody else in the comments probably agrees. I've been just seeing how everybody's just been so supportive of you, and you're just like our mom in the office too. Actually, I have so many moms. Honestly, I'm the youngest also in the office, so you're one of my moms, Marian. So is Pam.
and you know, it's funny because the thing that really it is going to be the story that goes back and forth going forward between generations is when my generation learned their new language, which is technology. And so I love it when I come into the office and I'm saying exactly to you what I say to my son Nicholas here in town and whatever is, how do I fix this? How does this work? So, I mean, there's always that back and forth. So and I think just in closing to our listeners, I think there's merit. I hadn't even thought about this until you asked me to do this topic, but I think there's tremendous merit in looking to our stories. We all have them. And yes, there's the things that are difficult, but there's the strengths, there's the things that shape us. We are much more a product of some of our stories than we want to think about sometimes. And then when we think about our story being carried forward and how that's going to become a legacy for someone else, I think there's tremendous room for discussion about our mental wellness, our mental illness, and certainly about stigma. Like, let's just get that off there so we can clear this platter and be honest and carry forward the strengths that we have. So thank you everyone for being here.
Yeah, so that's it for the Q&A. So on there it says, if Marian can answer your question tonight, please email her at programdirector@moodmb.ca. And if you have any other questions, yeah, just forward that. And we just want to let everybody know, just a reminder, if anyone has been triggered by Marian's story, because obviously, wow, just so many things in your life, lived and shared experience. You know, it's hard to talk about your own story, but Marian, you do it wonderfully. So if anyone does feel triggered and feels like they need support, we all encourage you to call our peer support line at 204-560-1461 and toll free at 1-800-263-1460. Also on our Facebook, I had put also the crisis line just in case you are really in need of immediate support. We also have clinic as well. So they have their 24-hour crisis line as well. And so on behalf of everyone at Moods, thank you to all who tuned in tonight. Thank you to everybody so much. It's been a pleasure to hear Marian's story, to have the audience interact. Thank you to Pam for opening it up. Thanks to all of our staff who have tuned in as well, because I have seen it in our Facebook comments as well. We hope you'll join us for our next speaker, Susan Spiropoulos. Sorry, I just don't want to say it wrong. Please correct me, who is scheduled for November 18th, and she'll share her story as well. So have a great night, everyone. Please stay safe, please stay healthy, and also just, yeah, stay tuned for our next speaker series. And yeah.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.